So for me, sustainable farming is about balance. Number one, farming practices in balance with nature, but not only nature, with environment. I mean, look at us at Klein, Constantia. We are in this urban environment, we're on a peninsula, we're on Table Mountain. So a sustainable conversation for Klein, Constantia is going to be different to a sustainable conversation to somebody in Elgin, where you are, surrounded by fruit farms, different context. A farm down in Earlham. So I think you can't just label something without, the farming practices always have to be taken in context, but not only environment. And this is where we could probably have another conversation, particularly we don't have anybody from WWF here as well, because it's absolutely nature is important, but there is this sense of the greater environment as well. And I'm now of the opinion that sustainable farming has to do with relationships with everything that is impacted or in that space, and finding a way to coexist that makes sense for everything, but that's going to allow for future existence. So it has to be with the future in mind, and it has to have a sense of a long term, a long game. Which brings us back to in the farming space, because it has to do with the soil, sustainability has to always go back to the ground. But if your approach is to be a custodian of it, take care of it and hand it on to a future generation, the way you do everything there is going to be different. So somebody recently, in a tour that I did and conversation I had, spoke about when I was explaining about, our past and having this tradition and still being relevant and moving to the future. He said, that sounds like you're speaking about the future of tradition. And I love that, because it actually, I think it encompasses it really well. It's about understanding what makes sense and what doesn't, and taking forward what does make sense. Now you're sitting with a brand, Klein Constantia, that has this history and it has this legacy, and part of it is because of the wines that have been made here. The only thing that differentiates Klein Constantia from any other place in the world is our terroir. Everything else can be replicated, our terroir cannot. So if we take that as the premise of our approach, then that becomes a thing we need to protect. And you were mentioning earlier that terroir is greater than soil. It's about culture, it's about something bigger. And you know what I think is going to happen? If your approach to sustainability is long term and a long game, it might require to be conventional some years, because the only way you're going to save your situation is by applying conventional techniques. It doesn't mean it's going to be something that you're going to do on a daily basis or on a regular basis, because you recognize that the impact is potentially detrimental. But if it's a difference between saving a crop and losing a crop, when you have 100 families that depend on you making that crop and making that wine and selling that wine, you actually don't have a choice. So I think that is also about, because that's where your sustainability feeds into economic, not only viability, but responsibility, which ties into the community that depends on it, which then allows you to continue into the future and then do your best practice and your ideal practice going forward.